Dr. Jazz.
Taking the time, I really appreciate it.
Oh man, no problem. Yeah.
I've been doing these interviews, and I kind of go through the record collection, and it's like you're on 40 of my records or something like that.
Oh, good. Wow.
And I've talked to so many guys that you basically played with, and
yeah.
I've always loved your drumming, and
oh, thank you.
Just would love to explore a little how you came where you are now. So, but I first want to start with Harold Danko. I listened to Spring Garden, and he sent it to me, and I love how you guys, your interaction with Harold is amazing. Like, how did you guys actually hook up in the beginning? And he's one of those so underrated musicians, actually, pianists. And but what's your story with Harold? I mean,
no, I mean, I knew Harold when I was coming up. I mean, he's a bit older than me. I'm not exactly sure how much older, but I think he was like, because I know he was playing with Woody Herman's band many years ago. I think he might have. I mean, Harold would know the story better than me. I think he was maybe in the Army. Maybe he was in the Army band with Joe LaBarbera, those kind of guys.
Sure.
And I believe they played with Woody together. Don't quote me, something like that. I think that's how he and Joe know each other. I think. And then, but Harold, and so when I was coming up in New York, he was playing with Thad Mel. I would see it with Mel Lewis, and he also played quartet with Thad and Mel, I believe. Maybe it was Rufus or George Mraz. I can't remember exactly, but so that's where I first met him. And I think we played a few gigs in town with people over the years. I can't really remember, but then I think I got asked to do the Manhattan School of Music workshop in Italy many years ago, and Harold was on the faculty then before he moved. He was still living in New York, and I think that's when we first played together. And then from that, he started, I think, asking me to do session, play through some of his music, and I don't know how much of that is you recorded. I think he used to record with a very good piano player. He used to play duo with Bert Lightsey, I think, maybe. I'm not sure.
Maybe, yeah.
And so, it might be. And then he hooked up with Nils Winter, who I already knew. And I think, so we were playing a bit, and then he decided, I'm going to start recording this music. And at that time, I think it was definitely Rich Perry and Scott Colley, I believe, was the first bass player. So that's a long story that's a long answer to a short story or something like that.
Just continue with these, it's it's beautiful how you guys, like, especially with Jay also. I mean, I love how Jay plays, and you two sound amazing together. And no, I just wanted to ask you about Harold, because he's one of those guys that people should know, but I don't think many know, about him. I mean, we did this interview, and he's such a nice guy also, and such a great composer.
But and also, I mean, and I'm sure he could tell you better than me. I think it was like he went in the I know he was teaching in Manhattan, excuse me, and then he moved to Connecticut, and I'm not sure if he was still commuting to do Manhattan. I can't remember. And then he got the gig at Eastman.
Yeah, exactly.
And then eventually he became maybe the jazz department chair at one point. Something like that. That's my guess. That's best I can recollect.
No, well, but beautiful, yeah. But you mentioned Woody Herman, and what was your introduction? I mean, I will go even further. Like, you were a teenager in the age when loud drummers kind of grew up, and
Oh yeah.
Like the fusion was on the rise.
Oh, I see.
Like early 70s. But what got you excited for jazz playing and improvisation? I mean, what was?
Well, I started I started pretty young, and I was just trying, I was just, doing, just listening to records like my friends, passing them around, probably the way we did for many years, turn some people on to different music and different. And then, but also when I was coming up in New York, you could get to hear the greats a lot, a lot of them, were it was always good. The really greats were always, you would learn. For me, I would learn, and hearing rhythm sections and great groups, so horn players as well, the way piano players comped and the way, different size groups and coming up. So I get to hear a lot of those, great cats, the famous iconic drummers. And some I would talk to them quietly, or just tell them how much I loved, how much I learned or whatever. And I got to hear a lot of those guys in person, So when I was coming up, but the Woody Herman thing, I only mentioned that because I think Harold, I know he came up through that. My thing was coincidental. I somehow I ended up doing that too, but for different reasons probably. But so.
Who are these drummers and rhythm sections that really excited you? I mean, you remember, I guess Alvin and Art Blakey and stuff like.
Oh, of course. Right? Yeah, I got to hear them a lot, and Billy Higgins, Ed Blackwell, Paul Motion, I would hear people like Vernel Fournier, just guys who were great, just played, it was that thing of, I think it just hit me like these guys they're so about the music. The drumming is amazing. Of course, we all get it. We know the signatures of a lot of these guys and younger guys too that have these amazing abilities and also are about the music and about listening and making music together. And I think that was clearly, I don't know that I thought of it that way at those days, but it was apparent to me, if you could go hear, Al Foster play with somebody, it was beautiful, great, beautiful drumming, very clean, beautiful, great conversation, but also listening. They were playing, they were making music together, and that was, I still feel that way, the guy just that things that I still like,
Yeah. No, you mentioned some of my favorites. I mean, Paul Motion.
Of course,
for me, like one of those, and Alvin, of course, like
Yeah. I mean, what's not to like?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was lucky. I mean, I don't know if I was lucky. I mean, a lot of guys. I was in New York, so I'd go hear clubs, and sometimes if it was a club I had played in, they would let me in. I let the kid in, that kind of thing, and so I would get to hear, whatever, just great guys, all the time. Yeah,
that's the best. Yeah. But what was your introduction like to the scene? I mean, who were the first people you connected? Like, I guess mid-70s or late 70s that you started getting gigs with. I mean,
well, I mean, growing up on Long Island before I moved to Manhattan, I mean, I was still playing with there was good. I don't know if there was a lot of jazz guys in Long Island. There probably were others that I didn't know about. But, Gary Smolian, a great, he was alto player then, but he baritone player and a great, amazing guy, an incredible musician. Just, he had everything. And Billy Drews was upcoming as well. So it was guys that I could learn from, and so I would hear them. But I think when I first got to town, I think it's probably similar now. I mean, somebody would recommend you, liked you playing on another gig, and said, this bass player would say to me, "Oh, I've been playing with Mose Allison." I don't know if you're hip to Mose Allison, but whatever. It was a really good gig for me, just to get out of town, just leave travel. And I was young, but and it was challenging, to try to find my place in the music. And so that was like one gig. That's basically what happens. The story. I'm sure it's, even now
with Mose.
I got it through this bass player, and Mose wasn't one of those kind of guys. I don't think that he really auditioned me. It was more like, all right, the guy recommended you, so I'll do. I forget, we went out of town 10 days, and if his Moses thing was, yeah, okay, you can do the next tour, I guess, something along those lines. And I was like, yeah, sure, So yeah.
Yeah, no,
and he was great.
Yeah, how were those gigs like for you? I mean, like, you were in your early 20s and already playing. I mean, he was quite big already then, right?
I guess, yeah, I mean, but that was also one of those things of becoming aware that, it's about their music. You're trying to find your, even as much as I was trying to learn from everybody everything I was listening to, but when it came to playing the music, I just felt like I had to find I guess I can't remember how I thought of it, but it was just, I had to find my place in the music and support him and support the bass player. And Mose was I wouldn't say he was outspoken. He was honest. If it's something he didn't like, because sometimes I remember specifically him saying something like, you're tired on the road, and he would add the verses to some of his famous songs. And I could tell, and he'd be looking at me, but I wasn't really aware of that. He was looking to see, are you really listening? That he threw in a different set of lyrics. And if I seemed like I was maybe not all there, and that was a really good lesson. It was like, are you really listening?
Yeah.
And so he was a cool guy, really interesting guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that you're not an autopilot, and it's
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and it was like, that, and I that through all my career of cats of different ages, I mean, people want to know that you're there with them, and supporting them. And people have different ideas of what maybe that means. It means it's different things. Some people just they need to get to a certain place in their music. That's not good or bad. That's not a critique. It's just other people just they need to go where the music goes collectively. That's other people, well, they want to go where it goes, but they need to know that you're accounting for their needs. I don't see that as being a bad thing either. It's just different.
Yeah.
And as many different versions, so.
Yeah. Like, speaking of bass players, I wanted to ask you about Mike Formanick. And I mean, this is I first heard you on those extended animation Wide Open Spaces records, which I love, by the way. And your connection with Mike is just, has been amazing. And like, how did you guys meet? Like, when was that your first time played together?
I think in New York, we started doing some gigs together. I met, he was I can't remember who we played with initially. I can't remember. Mike has I think he's such a smart guy and such a great musician. And he also, I think my sense is he has a pretty good memory of chronology, maybe. But when we started playing together more in his groups, we were playing with other people together, and he was kind of forming his ideas about what he wanted about music, which I think was pretty, I don't know if innovative is the word, maybe it was, but Mike was really trying to do something really personal. And as you know, and he had great people, really interesting improvisers. I think it was, when I first was doing it, I think it was Greg Osby and Wayne Krantz, who was also a friend, who is a friend of mine, who I go back with him a bit. We used to play with Leanie Stern together. And Wayne was also friends with my wife, Jamie Baum, was a flute player, composer. And so they went to school together. But Mike, going back to Mike, I mean, Mike was just, it was just, I loved his writing. I loved his playing. He was so open. He could seem like really interested in bringing a lot of, a really personal approach. I know that's really said a lot, but he definitely had that, he had a real, without a doubt, and then from that, I think Greg was maybe doing it. And I think then Mike and I maybe started playing with Tim Byrne around the same time. Maybe Mike before me, maybe me before. I can't remember exactly. Not in Tim's bands necessarily, but we played some together. And and in Mike's group, the Wide Open Spaces thing, and then we had a trio record for Soul Note called trio record.
Loose Cannon, that one.
Yes, that was
killing.
Tim's thing. And those guys are great. They're both great musicians and really, really interesting and really personal, and just I learned a lot from those guys. Yeah.
How did you deal with, or even now, like when you get like heavy compositions, like you played with John O'Gallagher, for instance, and who I played also and his compositions are immensely complex, I think, or like even Mike's, that extended animation and those, it's not easy compositions like one lead sheet. Like, how do you usually, as a drummer, cope with when you get several pages long, changing odd meters, like changing vibes? Like, how do you prepare for something like that, for let's say similar as Mike project, or those types of
I mean, a lot of those things in general, I think you get a chance to play their music with them. And then in my case, I would say, all those guys you mentioned were all friends of mine and guys I played with. And I think I would do homework as well. I would study like like some things came easier to me, and still it's no different now. I mean, maybe I have more experience, but I still, I can't say I take the same approach because I'm a lot older, but it's still the idea of I still have to get to the music. It's not about me leaving a signature but I have to play it correctly. So those people, they feel like they're, I'm getting with their messages, and then details, and then the things that have come trickier. I would say, well, if I got an hour on my own, there's no excuse for me not to put, if I have an hour of my own on a drum set, whatever, or just a small paired together little set with a cymbal and a snare drum or something, to just play, to get it through in my head a little bit, and that's helped me. And my weaknesses, I maybe did a little better, and some of my strengths were not as much of an issue.
No, but
still the same.
Because you became like you're one of my favorite drummers. I think of Tom Rainey, and I think you're kind of the same generation. That like with this incredible, I think, personal approach that you play a little, and I'm like, okay, that's Jeff or that's Tom, or and it's especially with this type of music, which is kind of was starting to happen then, like this combining odd meters and impro, and you make it sound so natural. That's why I'm asking, because it's just like it seems effortless, but then you take a look at lead sheets of these tunes, it's like, man, shit, that's some heavy stuff, so.
Well, I would say, again, they're all those, none of it was effortless. I mean, some of it, you could feel it. Like I said, I think some of it was maybe came to me a little more naturally, some elements of it, or I could catch on quicker, but then some of the details, the little pivot moves, or the things that were unnatural to me. And sometimes I would think, wow, and not to overanalyze it, is this like a North Indian influence? But then I'd be like, I can't think of it that way. I just have to, I think the first thing is understand the mathematics and the feel of how that math works. And then also, I think the nature, what everybody has a personality, or I hope, improvisers, I think some of it is just trying to, serve the music the best way you can, and without having, I don't have to leave a signature on it. I don't have to think about how the map is put together. I have to find a seamless way to deal with that language, and that story, or something like that.
No, to serve the music, that's always
I mean, and somebody like Tom Rainey, I don't see Tom as much, but over the years, and just the great musician, like a guy really understands, I mean, there's great player. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you went through like the similar, many guys of your generation, you know, through a straight ahead kind of playing, and then really exploring this outer realms of jazz, you know, what you guys have been doing, which I really like, you know, that you hear the tradition,
I mean, it's,
but
yeah. I mean, I think I mean, I can't speak for other guys, but
sure.
Or I don't think that would be fair, because I don't really know, but I mean, I think having some lineage or some, I came up listening to straight ahead guys. That's what I knew to listen to. I didn't have the intellect or the understanding. I mean, the first time I heard Bitches Brew, I think inherently I knew this was great, but I didn't really understand it.
Sure.
I was listening to Miles cooking and steaming. Obviously, all great, but I'm just saying, so it's like that thing, you take steps and you find out and you learn, oh, I see. I hear how these guys are doing it, an openness, but also a rooted nature to how they played, I mean, Jack DeJohnette, the first, I remember, he was doing a song for, like the Sid Catlett kind of, like the way Max did, his own version of something like that. I was like, yeah, I mean, that's some really rooted understanding, and I think the guys who, a lot of guys of my generation, decided to not just be, especially, I think it's also, I don't know, maybe, when you had to make a living too, so sometimes it was like, and it's like, not all those tours were happening. So it's like in New York, and it was like, I have to learn to play different ways and get better at those. But there were certain things that I did gravitate towards, though.
Sure.
Maybe more hybrid. I think we're talking about hybrid kind of, situations.
Yeah. I mean, it's especially the 90s. When I take a look at what you did in the 90s, man, that must have been crazy. Like, how was that like for you? It's just like, was it a lot of touring? I mean, or also a lot of New York? You did so many albums, I think, in that period. And
yeah, I mean, some of them, I honestly can't. I toured a lot. I played with a lot of people. I went to travel a lot to Asia and Europe often. When
was the first time you went to Europe, by the way?
The first time, the first time I went to was UK with Woody Herman.
Oh, wow.
That was the first time I got on a plane to go to Europe. But and that was we were in Europe. We were in UK for maybe a couple of weeks. Something like that, maybe longer. Yeah,
that's amazing. I wanted to ask you about the 90s. How did you hook up with David Binney? And he gave me a CD of Lang Sang, by the way, like when we played together in like 2000, and I love that stuff. It's one of those bands that should be mentioned more. It's such a
those guys are great. All three of those guys. I mean, Donna McCaslin and Scott Colley. I mean, Dave and I, again, it's a little hard to remember. Dave, another one, he probably remembers, but around when we started playing, I might have been introduced to him possibly by Scott Colley, who I played with a lot.
Yeah.
And I think they were friends. They might have been friends from California, or they had a connection because they're both from Southern California, I believe. And so I started playing with Dave, and he was just really just a, real, talk about another guy with a real personal approach, and a great. I learned a lot from him. He was great. Yeah.
You mentioned Scott Colley, and I think you played with every bass player, like with almost like all the most important bass players. I have a record of you with Gary Peacock, I think, with Mark Copeland, I think, and you somehow connect with every bass player. Like when you prepare for a project, do you listen to these cats that you're gonna play with? I mean, they're all your friends, more or less, but every bass player plays differently. One plays more ahead, one more behind. Like, how do you prepare? Like, or
I mean, that I know what you mean, and I've heard people say like, well, this guy does this or that. I mean, I think it's like, and I don't want to be glib. I don't mean to be glib. And it's just like, I'm just trying to find the music, to support. But I know it's clear to me even then. And I'm not just blowing smoke. I mean, really, it's not about me. I would love it to be about me. I would love when I find something that feels, wow, this somehow I think maybe I got something personal or somehow, or I'm not thinking I don't think I innovated anything because I haven't, but I definitely know I know when it feels like we're in the moment.
Yeah.
There's a moment happening. It feels real to me. And so I think playing with bass players, it's the same thing. You're going to play with rhythm sections, piano trios, or whatever, whatever things, whatever size groups, small groups. I think that it's just trying to find a way to connect, and support them, and So I don't think I really thought about it like, well, of course, Gary Peacock is an iconic guy, but a lot of those guys we're talking about that I came up with have some of those guys are kind of iconic guys now,
Sure.
You know what I mean? They're great. They've played with everybody. They've done everything. They've experienced. They're really, they really understand the music and how to play music, different kinds of music with different kinds of people. Yeah. And I think so, but I think maybe I would I would look at somebody like that a little differently, who's maybe older, because I just think by the nature of age and respect, maybe, Gary Peacock isn't my buddy. He's not my pal.
Sure.
You know what I mean? He's somebody I'm working with, and that kind of thing. So,
yeah. When you mentioned the elders, did you go like through a phase of apprenticeship, kind of like playing with the older generation? If you know what I mean, like that you had, like, I don't know, tours with someone who was 10, 15 years older than you. I mean, most was, I guess, so of course, but like jazz guys, like beboppers or.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know who it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, because you played with so many guys. I mean, like many horn players played, like, or like drummers went playing with Betty Carter for years, or that's what I mean, like. But I guess you did it. Yeah, you played in the 80s with everyone almost. So.
I'm sure they are surrounded, but I don't remember exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
To be honest, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your connection. You mentioned Gary Peacock and John Abercrombie was part of that band. I mean, I have that CD actually, My Foolish Heart, and you played with John a bit. Like, how was John like, Abercrombie? I mean, did you play a lot with him? And
I mean, I play with him some. I don't know what it's. Sometimes it's hard to say what's a lot.
Yeah,
okay. But I did play him, and I knew him, and he a really nice guy. He was a really, really a good guy, and I liked him very much. But I did play with him a bit, yeah. And he was a great musician, yeah.
Yeah, and also Vic Juris, right? You did a lot of records with him. I mean, he's another one of those greats that.
A great guy. I played in his group for many years.
Yeah.
And great musician. I think, and we did a lot of records with different companies, and then he started recording a lot, maybe with, what's the guy and Nils Winter.
Steeplechase, yeah.
Steeplechase, yeah. So he was recording for him a lot and writing a lot. And I would fairly did a bunch of projects with Vic over the years. Yeah.
Yeah. I love Vic. I mean, he has been so good, really.
Would you know him at all? Did you know Vic?
No, I mean, I have like a bunch of CDs of his, but I transcribed so many of his solos, and always when I get a chance to speak with people who played with him, I try to ask him about him, because he's one of those kind of overlooked guitarists in the guitar realm.
I would agree.
History,
I would agree with that. Like really gifted guy, and he was living in Jersey, and I think he liked teaching as well, and but he was a good guy, really nice guy, great musician.
Yeah. We mentioned Tom Rainey before, and I did this talk also, like with Mike Serene and many other drummers, and Tom became a band leader like 8 years ago when he was, I don't know how old he was, mid-50s, I guess. Mike Serene kind of said he wants to do it, and I wanted to ask you what's you and band leading. I know you did some gigs in Smalls, like as a band leader, but like, do you want to lead bands? I mean, have you done that in the past, or writing music?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking, because I think it's like there's like a thing where I never sought to lead a band. The time where I think at Smalls, they just, for some reason, they didn't like, they wanted to have a name. So and so all of a sudden, I think the trio was maybe that it was thought as my group, and it really wasn't. I guess I was if anything, I was that might have been with Iago Vasquez,
and Scott Lee,
and Scott Lee, and Scott, I've known for many years, and Iago as well, younger, but that was their music really, and maybe a few improvised pieces on a record, and that became like, somehow I think it was like they asked me, well, because I don't know, maybe I said I'll make the call because I know the people there, and they'll say, okay, you can, and so then they would be like, but we need a name. And then I realized too late, it's the Jeff Hirshfield Trio. There's no such thing, believe me, and never has been. I have no desire. I'm not saying that would never happen, but I wasn't seeking that out. So that's how that became. And they just wanted a name, and because I was the connection, maybe I knew the, people more there that said, okay, well, we know you, so that's how it happened,
But
and the other. Sorry.
Yeah, if do you want to, have you ever thought about leading a group, or how are you on terms with that?
No, I mean, again, I think to start with, it would be like, I think maybe the first time I was ever on a co-op thing was maybe with Fred Hirsch and Mike Formanick, and that was mainly because it had the name of a group, and so that people get the impression that I was just a drummer. I was playing with those guys. They were great. They were both. Fred is great, obviously, as is Mike. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm glad to be here, and so I didn't. I'm not just trying to be, just to be nice, but I think I was the drummer. I think they somewhat liked playing with me, and I was the drummer, really. But I'm looking a little bit, because I have done a few other things, like, the Lanzang. I think you mentioned that. Did you mention that? And then there was, and then there was also a group called Cloning Americana.
Oh shit!
Which is oh yeah, that's with Billy Drews. Gary Versace or Versace, whatever. I'm not sure what Gary likes being called these days, but and Scott Lee and myself, and that's on Francois Alacane's label, and that was so that, again, I don't know, I'm just sort of like the drummer, but I'm kind of a little more, not, you know what I mean? They do the writing, so.
So you never tried composing, or have you, like?
Not really. No,
not really.
No, I just like playing, I'm not saying that would never change. Sometimes I think I need to learn more about music, that would be nice. But yeah, I mean, I think also, I'm not sure, but I think as I'm presented with so many challenging over my time playing music, and today I'll face it, probably whoever I play with today or play with yesterday or the day before, I'll probably have a challenge there. You know, I still feel like I have a lot of work. I have a lot of things to figure out. Yeah.
Interesting. What's what's on the schedule for this year for you? Let's say touring wise, or playing wise, or project wise, for instance.
Well, I just finished Jamie Baum's record Septet Plus. Have you heard
beautiful.
this?
No, I mean I know Jamie. Man, I have to do this talk with Jamie also. Tell her that.
Yeah.
I'll write her.
I will.
I love her music.
Absolutely. Yeah, she just did a record last week. As new she records for Francois Zalakane as well, and I think so. She did a lot of new music that she's been, sort of formulating since COVID, that time, and really worked on her music, and it has vocals as well as part of the voices. It's not like it's I mean, I just recorded it and just but it was last week we couple of long days to record, but really great musicians. She hired really great people, and so that was something we'll see what happens with that, but yeah, that's the most recent one. Yeah.
Who's in the band, by the way? I mean,
let's see, it's Ricky Rodriguez is playing bass, Luis Perdomo is playing piano.
Oh, wow. Beautiful.
Yeah, great. And Brad Shepik.
He's played a lot with him.
And who else is there? Jonathan Finlinson,
Wow,
and who else? I'm trying to think. Who else was in that? I'm checking out a little bit, but yeah.
Oh, beautiful, man.
And Sam Sadegurski.
Oh, wow.
He's playing bass, clarinet, and alto on this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And Jamie's playing flute and alto flute, and then there's different vocalists, So,
looking forward to this one. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys talk about music? I mean, does she come to you sometimes with some rhythmical ideas, like how to approach, like like Carla Blane, Steve Swallow, or what, or how you want to call it, like a music?
I mean, yes and no. It's hard to say. I mean, I think she. I mean, it might be me asking more of her. What are you thinking here, or something like that? If I want to spend time figuring something out, and also she hires people also that have a say in it, and they'll be opinionated about it. I don't have to agree or either way. It's just, but they certainly know what they're doing. So.
Yeah.